like today's video, please like and subscribe to YouTube for us. If you want more videos, we need people to like the page. We need people to subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything, but it helps us out immensely. We'll get better at this, but we need you. You also, if you have places that you'd like us to go interview, please put those down in the comments. We enjoy communicating with you. Thank you again for another week, and we'll see you again. Welcome back to RoadrunnerZX. We have our guest today, Sam Lewis, who owns PrideStaff with his wife and his daughter that works there. If you're looking for a agency to help you find a job, this is a great company here in town. Sam Lewis has given back in so many ways, and I look forward to this interview today. Sam, I'd like to welcome you today. How are you?
Good to be here.
So we're just going to jump into some of the questions and talk about PrideStaff.
Okay.
I actually have PrideStaff up there.
Oh,
on the wall.
Well done.
So with the name PrideStaff, is that because your company looks at it from a standpoint of you need a whole pride of lions to protect you out in the job market, or what's the mission and vision for PrideStaff?
That's pretty good, Michael. I like that. We're a franchise, so I own the franchise. So I knew the founder, and George was a great guy. Really passed away a few years ago, and it was very disappointing to me because he's one of those guys that had been around and knew a lot about a lot of things and a lot of business stuff, and was an innovator and a true entrepreneur. But he told me one time a little bit of the backstory on PrideStaff, and I can't remember all the details, but there was definitely he definitely had an idea in mind why I call it PrideStaff, and I think I may be making this up, but I think before he actually went into franchising of the PrideStaff franchise, he actually had a medical at-home healthcare business that somehow some of that stuff bled over into the. So the PrideStaff thing is just part of the franchise name. It's nothing I came up with, but I do like the name.
So let's explain that real quickly. So you have a small business. So I've always been a small business owner of, well, I won't say I've always been. I've been an employee too. I started my first business in 2008. Great year to start a business.
Absolutely the worst year in the last quarter century.
My question to you is, help the viewers understand, what's the difference between somebody like myself that just puts a name on a door and goes out there versus your franchise?
Well, that's a wonderful question, and so I've said this before. People will say, well, Sam, you're a successful entrepreneur in Bloomington. I stop them. I say, no, I'm not really an entrepreneur. I bought a business. I didn't start a business. And even though that's still way beyond a lot of people's comfort level, right? You've invested a lot of money, your own money, to get this business. It's still not entrepreneur to the full extent that I think of real entrepreneurs like yourself or Tim Norman at STL.
But there's still risk in there. I mean, it's not a guarantee. I have a franchise, I'm going to be successful.
Getting a job is a risk.
Yeah.
What people don't understand, they think they're safe just getting a job. Well, guess what? You're laid off next week, next year, whatever. So there's risk in everything. There's risk in getting up in the morning. That's true. And I'm just saying from the level of risk and work, because entrepreneurs are, they got to come up with the letterhead, the business model, the furniture design, the logo design. I just bought it all. Mm-hmm. They said it's plug and play. Mm-hmm. Here it is. You follow the book and you'll be successful. Mm-hmm. And when you're a true entrepreneur, you're kind of out there on your own, alone, and you're freestyling and you're coming up with all of it. Mm-hmm. And I bought PrideStaff when I was 55 years old, and I'm like, I was kind of looking at the timeline, like to start a business from nothing, at 55. Not that it's impossible, I mean, Colonel Sanders did it, he was 60 something, and
older.
Or Ray Kroc when he was in his late 50s, early 60s. But they also, if you think about it, they also bought, Ray Kroc particularly bought a business. He bought the McDonald's brothers out. Mm-hmm. And so he was starting a little bit ahead of the game, but these people with real entrepreneur chops are like my friend Adam Steffi. I mean, they start from ground zero.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't dare equate myself to them.
Okay, so how did you make that jump from employee to employer?
Boredom.
Boredom, okay. Explain that.
Well, I had been, I've discovered about myself finally over all these years that when I've done something 7 or 8 years in a row, I start getting bored with it. And I start looking for other things. And when I get bored, my wife used to say, when you get bored, bad things happen. She's right. So I had been working for Quantex for 17 years. In my last position at Quantex, I was the VP of engineering. And Michael, you know me, I'm not an engineer. Basically at heart, I'm an HR guy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I ended up managing factories and running factories and all the departments in a factory, and one of those departments is engineering. And so I think I did a good job of that, of letting the engineers engineer and, knocking the walls down for them. And so I ended up as a VP of engineering for Quantex. So I had 8 factories across the United States. Had the unique experience of opening a factory. I needed a factory out on the West Coast, so I got on a plane one day and I flew out to Hood River, Oregon, and you guys got any empty buildings? Basically is what I did. They go, yeah, we'll give you this building if you'll move in. We'll give it to you for free for a year if you'll move in. So I started moving equipment out there and started a factory. But, I just kind of got, my old boss used to say about the VP level, he says, yeah, it's an interesting job, but you really don't own anything. Where when I had a factory,
mm-hmm.
I was stacking product in the warehouse.
Mm-hmm.
But with the VP, I finally got what he had understood, what he had told me years ago, that I didn't really, as a VP, each plant manager has their plant and their things and so I was just kind of aiding in that, and so I kind of got bored with that. I got bored with the travel, and so I left Quantex. I didn't have a job. I didn't have any, but Quantex my career had been good, and Quantex had been good to me. So I just didn't do anything for a while. I kind of just looked around and did the mission and value and purpose statement, and I recommend that. I do some career counseling as well, but I recommend that to anybody. Sort of the fly. I don't know if you're familiar with what color is your parachute, but there's an exercise in it called the flower petal exercise. But it's kind of that thing. What's your mission? And you and I have talked about
mm-hmm.
this before. I think when the first time I met you, we kind of went down that. But what's your mission in life? What's your purpose? And what do you value? And when you start making those lists up, then you realize what you're going to say no to,
mm-hmm.
which is probably the most important thing. So, I started saying no to a lot of things.
Yeah.
And so then I got into, there are, I don't know if you know this, but there are franchise brokers.
Okay, yes.
And so I contacted a franchise broker and started talking about, I decided I didn't, I've been around businesses and ran business. I got a business degree. So I decided I didn't want to, at 55, start a business from the ground up. So I looked at buying a business.
Mm-hmm.
And I really wanted to buy a manufacturing business, but there was only one around here, I won't mention the name, that I might have considered. But it starts to get really complex, and you really need a team of accountants, lawyers, people to do due diligence. And I just didn't really have anybody at that time. And then I, started understanding the franchise model, and the federal disclosure document that goes with every franchise was sort of your due diligence.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when I got with a franchise broker, and then I went through 3 franchises I did discovery on, and finally ended up with PrideStaff.
Wow.
Sorry for this breakaway, but I would like to thank our sponsor today of Roadrunner Real Estate.
I'd like to thank our sponsor today, Roadrunner Real Estate. They're a full-service real estate company that helps both commercial and residential to find properties. That's whether it's buying, selling, or leasing. They do free consultations and have decades of experience. So if you're looking for that personal touch, contact Roadrunner Real Estate today. They'd love to help you.
We'll say across your career, it looks like you have a love for HR. You read a lot there.
I do.
So to me, that makes you a professional matchmaker out there of trying to get the right person for the right job. Like, how do you help people, marry them to the right person with a 401k when it's hard to get somebody that you can marry and live with for the rest of your life?
I use the clamps method, I call it. And you're exactly right, and that's a great observation. It's a match. We're matchmakers, and I used to joke about that. When I have a job that I'm trying to fill, let's go that way first.
Mm-hmm.
When I have a job I'm trying to fill, and I start sourcing candidates, and we could talk ad nauseum about how to source candidates, but let's say I come up with some candidates,
Mm-hmm.
and I want to know. And the first thing is I try not to necessarily look for unemployed candidates.
Uh-huh.
All right, because that's not that I get anything against it, and not that I don't recruit unemployed candidates, but generally speaking, the person I want doesn't even know they want my job.
Uh-huh.
So I have to connect with them somehow, and then I have to understand if they're ripe for the picking, as I say.
Mhm.
And so I use clamps, and I ask them, if I can get past that passive candidate first conversation where I don't scare them off, or like
Mhm.
they don't no, I'm so happy you can't believe it, and this is my current job. So I try to understand what's important to them, sort of the mission, purpose, and value. And clamps is challenge, location, advancement, money, people, and security.
Mm-hmm.
So those things are all important to us at some level,
Mm-hmm.
but they're all not the most important. One of those is most important to you, me, and they change over time.
Mm-hmm.
When you're young and you're starting your career, and advancement and money are a big deal. You got a mortgage, you got a car payment, you got kids in school, you need money.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to understand, talking with candidates, what's at the top of their list. If, for example, money is at the top of their list and they're currently well paid, and my job would just be like a lateral move payment, I'm probably not going to recruit them.
Mm-hmm.
If the money's good and my opening job has got good money, but they're interested in advancement and they're in a flat organization, and I got a chance with several levels, I got a chance of recruiting them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just that, that's how I kind of look at it. They're all different, but that's kind of how I look at recruiting, is that what is important to them, and does my job fulfill that important thing in their MPV?
For me, in real estate, it was this. I had a person who sells hundreds of millions of dollars of real estate, and they said to me, if you don't have a motivated seller and a motivated buyer, walk.
That's right.
And in the beginning, you're so hungry, you run after everything.
That's
And
right.
now, as a more seasoned agent, I'm like, nope, if I don't have those two things there, then people see me kind of disappear, wait in the weeds, and then wait for everything to come back, and then I pull it back together for them later.
When you go to business school, the first rule they teach you is pay yourself first. The second rule they teach you is time is money.
Yep.
And so, I'm like you. I chased a lot of bad dollars down the alleyway, and I made a little money, but gosh, it took me, so it's these economies of scale. These, where's our best, payment that for the least amount of work,
Mm-hmm.
so we can go on and work at the next project. But I've been down a lot of rabbit holes where I thought I was recruiting somebody, and all along they were playing me,
Yeah.
to get a better deal
Yep.
at their current job.
So,
And that still happens, but it happens less.
Mhm. We're going to go into a little bit more of a personal. We're going to keep the people nameless on this. But what is one of the most creative skill sets you've ever seen on a resume?
Well, I'll start with a little bit of humorous one first. I was reading a resume one time, and I was like, man, this person has done a lot of customer service, but this is a weird. So I read it again, and I was like, why am I not putting my? So I brought Candace in. My daughter works for me. She's into recruiting and sourcing candidates. And I said, Candace, read this. And she read it, and she goes, she's a stripper. I read it again. I was like, I cannot believe that got past me. Customer service. I wish I'd have saved that, but yeah, that was probably one of the top 5. But it is. I mean, I read a lot of imaginative resumes, but at the end of the day, I mean, they can all start to blend together. There's, if it's there's 2 things I say about resumes, and this is what I coach in career coaching too. Like the thing that gets you in the door the first day are the technical things. If I need a welder, are you a welder? If you're not a welder, it doesn't matter what the rest of the interview's like.
Yeah, Amy and I had in the law practice when we had that, somebody that said, I just don't want to work 3rd shift. And we're like, well, clearly you don't want to work in the law office either. Yeah,
I mean, those are technical things, and I don't need to know what your character's like or even your clamps. I just, this don't fit. So, but then there's the what I call the eulogy traits. It's the things that when you're dead, they'll say at your funeral. And we know from research that people, even when they get hired, the reason they, like 80% of people that lose their job in the first year don't lose it for technical issues. They lose it for these eulogy traits. They weren't a good team player. They didn't show passion or empathy or compassion or empathy, or they had bad EQ skills, or, so that it. So when I'm looking at a resume, I'm trying to discern some of this, eulogy versus this resume kind of stuff. And the first thing too, you got to, can they weld? And then the second thing too, can I tell if they are, can they work with a team, or do they work alone? Do they, some of these things, and then you try to get in the interview and do the same thing. But the challenge is that at the end of an hour in an interview, when that person walks out of the interview room, they're still a stranger to you unless you know them personally. They're still a stranger. Malcolm Gladwell wrote a whole book on it called "Talking to Strangers," and I read that. It really keyed with me because I was like, that's true. I mean, there's other things you have to do when you're sourcing candidates. Reference checks. Call somebody that they worked for in the past. What was this person? They tell me they work well with teams. They go, no, we had to put them in a corner by themselves, alone. And the other thing to look for, I think, in a resume, and I'm giving away all my secrets here, but I look for achiever patterns. Where did they start out, and where have they ended up? And yeah, people have. You mentioned 2008. It's like resume after resume after resume you'll read. There's this little blip in 2008, So I get that. But when you come across a real hot resume, you'll see an achiever pattern. Whoever they were working for decided you're getting more responsibility, you're getting more authority. Maybe they didn't get the direct promotion, but you can see where they achieved. They kept achieving in their career, and their range got broader. And so those are the kind of things that I'm looking for usually. Now, some jobs you don't really, they're highly technical, and you don't necessarily care if they've achieved, continued to achieve or expand. But other jobs, most jobs, in a way, have some form of where achiever pattern is a good thing for the position.
Well, for me, so I've managed hundreds of people over the course of my career, and had done interview after interview. One of the businesses I worked for, they actually made a mandate where it was every person that was hired had to go and interview with me. And I remember I was with one of my assistants, and my thing was always get them to tell me what they don't want to tell me. And so I was always trying to move through that thing.
That's a wonderful way to put it too.
And we're interviewing for a teller bank position. And so I got him on the thing of, I said, so what was one of the most tedious things you had to do at a retailer here? And he thought about it for a couple of minutes, and he looked at me and he said, one of the most tedious things I hated doing was counting down the drawer at the end of the night.
And so my way of getting out of the interview very quickly there was, well, we're looking for a part-time position on this, and so we'll see if your schedule fits in with ours. We'll get back to you. So he leaves, door shuts. My assistant's eyes are just absolutely huge looking at me, and she goes, how did you get him to say that? And I said, I just kept on probing because he was giving me the standard like answers to stuff. I'm like, you're not telling me who you are, and I'm going to push you until you finally tell me who you are. And he finally nailed it there. I was like, interview over.
Well, that's a great example. I have some trick questions that I'm not going to share them all here, but I do have some questions like that. Well, I'm glad you brought that up because it is amazing what people will tell you in an interview. If you lay and you say they don't want to, I feel a little different about. I think they really want to. And they'll tell you things you're like, I cannot believe they said that in this room to me. But to the other point, I'm going to step back a little bit about, them asking you to do the interview. There's something to that, and I know in Laszlo Bock's book, Work Rules, he's the guy who's the VP of HR for Google, and he has a chapter on interviewing and their sourcing, how Google does it, and managers, would interview for candidates for their departments, and they would track the managers and their hiring success. And if they fell below a certain percentage, they got uninvited to interview even for their own department, and they would bring it out another manager. And that's not necessarily a ding on that manager. It is somewhat an art form and a skill set interviewing. And again, without naming names, my office is set up where my conference room is next to my office, and the walls are thin. And sometimes my clients will come in and do the interviewing in the conference room of my candidates, and I can hear them interview. And I heard one day, it was sort of like, in the interview, if you're a Cubs fan and I'm a Cubs fan, you're hired. And they'll come out raving about the candidate, and I've heard the whole interview is like, you know nothing about this guy except he's a Cubs fan. And so. Yeah, people have told me 100 times I'm a great interviewer, and I've got to see him in action. I'm like, this is not good.
So, what's one of the strangest jobs you've ever had to fill?
I don't know. We've been pretty. I've filled every kind of job you can think of, except for lion tamer or zookeeper. But, we've done everything you can fill in the office: accounting, HR, IT, logistics, materials management, procurement, purchasing. I don't know. I don't know if we've had any really strange ones. I guess the most unusual one we had, and I felt, with recruiting, you think you found the perfect candidate and you don't fill the job, and you worked hard to do it and you're disappointed. And then other times you get this strange job, and all of a sudden you have the candidate and you fill the job and you go, man, I got lucky. And Candace used to say that to me, how we got lucky. I said, we've been open 10 years to get lucky. And one of them, we filled a job for a nonprofit organization that it was like a part-time job, but it was kind of a high-level situation. They had property management involved in it, and it's a local business. If I'd said it, you'd know it, and everybody in town would know it. So I'm not going to say it. But the interesting thing is, the guy came to my office. He called me, and I didn't know him, and he was on the board of directors for this place, and he says, I'm coming to your office. Okay. And he shows up, and he's telling me all the details of this job. I'm sitting there going, I'm never filling this job. And I'm thinking he's got everybody in town working on it. And he was a really smart guy, because when he got done, it was an hour, and he's walking out, and he turned around, and he come back, and he goes, I want you to know you're the only person working on this job. Well, right then, for a recruiter, that changed it. Go back to the thing you brought it up about chasing hours after not a lot of dollars. And that changed the dynamic. Like, he's serious. So this is a real headhunt. but within a week, I had the right candidate because it wasn't a full-time job, it wasn't 40 hours a week. But there was a couple of weeks in the year where they, like 2-week periods in the year where this person was going to be working 80 hours. Because they had these 2 special events that promoted their nonprofit. And so I had a friend who, and again, this is the harder you work, the luckier you get. So I had a friend who'd given me this resume like the week before. I'm like, I'm never finding her a job. And then this guy comes in and does it, and then I pull that resume and I go, oh my gosh, this is the perfect fit.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I first gave them the resume, they were cool over it.
Mm-hmm.
They were not. And so then I went and met with the board, and I said, here's why you need to take another look at this resume. And here's some things I see in it that I don't think you're seeing it. And so they said, okay, we'll interview. And when they did it, the board interviewed her, fell in love with her. She's still there.
Yep.
After all these years, and so some of the board members have contacted me later and said, man, I don't know how you did it. A little bit of me is like, yeah, I'm just good at it, and I didn't tell them, a little bit of it's happenstance, that I happen to have this resume. But that was probably, of all the ones that we filled, it was way out of our normal wheelhouse to fill. We don't get calls like that very often.
Well, I have a couple stories of that back with my wife's law firm, but the one that is the most pointed is I went to a business here in town, and there was this young girl at the front desk, and she just seemed to do a really nice job, and we were looking for somebody at the time. And so I go back to the office. I said to my wife, I really want to get this person in for an interview. I think we should hire her. And I said, but I'm not going to call her because I'm an old guy, and I don't want to call some young girl to say, can you come in? Will you please call her and bring her in? And so my wife was skeptical at the time of, is this the right person, whatever. And so she called her and said, hey, my husband really thinks you're the person. Are you looking for any opportunities? And she said, actually, I am. And so she comes in for an interview. And this was the thing that sold it for my wife, is they're sitting at our conference room table, and the person looks across from her and goes, I'd really like some coffee. Would you like some coffee too? And my wife is like, well, yeah, I'd love some coffee. She gets up, she goes to our break room, pours 2 cups of coffee,
that's strong.
puts some cream in there, comes back, sets it down back on the table, and I hear him laughing in the room and everything. He's talking about paper thin, walks out, and my wife goes, you're right, she's hired.
Yeah, that's strong.
Yeah.
That's risky too, though. That could have went sideways with the customer.
Mm-hmm.
But that also tells you that person had a good read on your wife,
Mm-hmm.
which is another strong characteristic with folks.
Mm-hmm. So now let's go. Let's talk about the man behind it all. Okay. So this is you. Do you consider yourself to have the heart of a warrior or the heart of a Saluki?
That's a tough one. I am an SIU graduate, by the way.
I know.
Yeah.
But I also know where you got your associates.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm kind of maybe more a warrior to some extent than a Saluki.
Okay.
My Saluki experience wasn't, going to actually literally college thing wasn't traditional. And in fact, I had this discussion yesterday with a woman I was working with some career counseling. I wasn't, I was building tires when I was 18 years old. I didn't go to college till I was in my late 20s. And college experience then there was no online.
Mm-hmm.
So you could, so you had to be present in a classroom. Community colleges saved my life in a way because community college was developed for the non-traditional students. So I took a lot of classes for a while. I was going to be an English teacher or something, and then I realized it's going to take forever because all the English literature classes are during the day, and I work during the day.
Mm-hmm.
So I literally opened up the college catalog and said, what do they offer at night? They offered business classes. So that's what I took. That's the only reason I took business classes is because I could get a degree at night. So that's what I did. And so that was, and then when at SIU, again, most degree programs are taught during the day. There are very few at night. But SIU had this program that they offered, they flew professors from Carbondale to various Air Force bases around the United States and offered this degree in training and development, adult training and development. And so they decided, for whatever reason, to offer it at the Ramada Inn in Mount Vernon. So for 2 years, every other weekend, Saturday and Sunday, I went to school to get this bachelor's degree in training and development. So it wasn't a traditional ISU or SIU experience. Really, like maybe a little more traditional, but not certainly. I never went on campus at SIU except for some side classes I took on my own, but never went on campus. So I think my ethos is a little bit warrior versus Saluki.
Okay.
Please stay tuned for part 2 of the Sam Lewis interview with PrideStaff. He has many great insights and things that he's done for our community. We look forward to seeing you again next week on RoadrunnerZX.